Kyle was commissioned to be built in 1912 by the Reed Newfoundland Company. The shipbuilder was Swan Hunter & Company of Newcastle upon Tyne, England. The Kyle arrived in St. John's in April of 1913. She measured 220 feet in length, 32 feet wide with a depth of 18 feet, and gross tonnage of 1,055 tons. The Kyle contained 6 furnaces and had a speed of 22 miles per hour, or 19 knots. The Kyle had the most up-to-date radio of its time installed and was equipped with a heavy front end for the purpose of icebreaking. The Kyle came to be known as the Bulldog of the North. While not being the largest in the Reed Company fleet, she was the fastest. The Kyle spent her first 2 years serving communities on the northeast coast of the island of Newfoundland and on the Labrador coast. During the first year of World War I, the Kyle was transferred to the ferry run between Port aux Basques, Newfoundland and North Sydney, Nova Scotia, replacing ferries that were requisitioned by the British Admiralty. The Kyle remained on the ferry run for 10 years. In 1923, the Kyle steamed through ice to Pass Island near Harbour, Britain, to rescue some 52 residents from starvation. The Kyle would often steam up and down the coast providing much-needed medical aid, such as supplies and government nurses and doctors. At times, the Kyle carried livestock as well as dry goods to distant coastal communities. Passengers could number up to 350, even though there were only berths for 160 total. In 1927, William Randolph Hearst, owner of the newspaper The New York Daily Mirror, sponsored a non-stop flight from Maine to Rome. He purchased a Fokker monoplane and named it Old Glory. The flight departed Maine on September 6th. On September 7th, a SOS was heard by the steamship Transylvania. A search ensued, consisting of 52 vessels. Nothing was found. Mr. Hearst then chartered the Kyle under Captain Ben Taverner to take part in the search. Captain Taverner and crew located the wreckage of Old Glory within 3 days. While there were numerous vessels at sea involved in the search, it was Captain Taverner's skills as a mariner that enabled them to track the currents to locate the wreckage. In February of 1942, 2 American naval ships, the Truxtun and the Pollux, during a severe storm ran aground in Chambers Cove on the Burin Peninsula. The Kyle was tied up at St. Lawrence, a short distance away. Upon hearing of the vessel's distress, Captain Connors ordered the Kyle to sea in order to aid the vessels. Upon their arrival, and after a lot of maneuvering, it was determined that the sea was too rough, and the Kyle sailed back to St. Lawrence. Upon their arrival at St. Lawrence, the crew gathered ropes, axes, and ship's blankets to be used to give aid to the survivors. Captain Connors also dispatched 2 nurses from the Kyle to help with the survivors. Of 389 sailors, 186 survived through the actions of the residents of Lawn and St. Lawrence. In 1959, Shaw Steamships of Halifax purchased the Kyle and renamed her the Arctic Eagle. They operated her as a sealing vessel off the Labrador coast. In 1961, the Earl brothers of Carbonear bought the steamer and restored her original name, Kyle. The Earl brothers also used her as a sealing vessel until the spring of 1965, at which time she sustained damage from an iceberg. The Kyle returned to Carbonear, where it was determined that the cost of repairs would be too great. The Kyle was then moored off at Harbour Grace to await its fate. The Earl brothers sold the vessel for scrap to Dominion Metals. In a fierce nor'easter wind, the Kyle broke free of her anchorage and was pushed further into the harbour and upon the shallows of Riverhead. Seawater entered her hull, helping to further embed her into the sandy shallows. In 1972, the provincial government bought the Kyle and let her stay in the shallows. 25 years later, in 1997, the government put a fresh coat of paint on the Kyle to help celebrate Newfoundland's 500th anniversary. 2017 is the 50th anniversary of the Kyle going aground in the shallows of Riverhead. The town of Harbour Grace has a small tour chalet near the site of the Kyle. It has a room dedicated to the Kyle's storied history.